Welcome to Biz Meds with Darris and Saad, where we give you the medications for your business. This podcast is all about the minimum effective doses you need to make a massive improvement in your business. Listen and enjoy.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Biz Meds. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
And I'm Darris.
So one of the things that we try to embody when we're doing our podcasts is be able to clearly communicate. And
Not always easy.
it's hard, right? It's absolutely hard because sometimes in my mind, I think I know what I'm talking about. But when I try to relay it out and listen back to the podcast, like, what was I trying to say? Like 101th. Like, sorry for the new viewers. Minimally. But you know, the reality is a lot of business owners, leaders go through this in their day to day. You know, communication is one of the things that, and we've talked about this. You said this beautifully in a different podcast. Communication and learning how to communicate is something we as humans will continually keep working on. Nobody's perfected it. Nobody has, gotten to a point that, every word that comes out of their mouth, every sentence that comes out of their mouth is just perfect.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this podcast is to kind of help relay that message to you guys, and how to have hard conversations, how to have conversations.
How to communicate more effectively.
Exactly, yeah.
What are some of the skills that we can give you, things that you might even not be aware of that you're doing to help you communicate better with your team, with your people, with each other?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really the
premise of this one.
The premise of this one. Yeah, communication, I think, is a good starting point. And it's another one of those topics that are really large, but hopefully we'll become a lot more focused with it as we kind of dive into it. And it is one of we talked about skill versus mastery.
Yeah.
Communication. I believe you have to start developing this skill. It's one of those ones that you will always work towards a mastery of because there's just so much to learn. We are humans. We have so many different ways we come to the table with our knowledge, skill, and experience. And we all have these different paths that we've come. And so no two interactions are going to be the same. What we want to do is look at what are some really key things that we can help to make some of those interactions, like you said, maybe some of the harder conversations a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What has been your experience when people have had to have those harder conversations with you? How have they gone?
So I'm, for me, when you ask me that question, it immediately goes to like, there's been some really good ones. Mm-hmm. There's been some where they knew exactly what they wanted to say, mm-hmm. and some where they were, straightforward.
So let's do this. Think about the best one you ever had.
Yeah.
What was that? Like, what were some of the key characteristics of that conversation?
Empathy and a bit more of an understanding as to how I might receive it. Mm-hmm. So, curating it around the best way to deliver that without striking a nerve, mm-hmm. right? And this kind of goes back to the episode where we're talking about how people associate different meanings to different words, right? So
where you think you're saying one thing,
yeah,
you think you're speaking the same language, but because there's a difference in meaning,
yeah,
two very different interpretations come out of that.
Absolutely. Like, I had one manager basically tell me like, you're not at your desk enough. You're not sitting there enough, and it's a problem. And I was like, what do you mean? And I immediately got defensive about that. And what he was trying to say was that like at certain times, it's just better to be there. And everything else aside from that, like it was only good things he had to say about that. But in trying to coach me about, say, for example, 8 a.m. when people are coming in and I'm out and about, like trying to help people, perception isn't good of what I'm kind of like relaying to my teammates, even though if it's my intentions might be good, but my actions may not be perceived as that way.
Right.
So instead of him kind of cushioning it and wording it a bit more sensitively in terms of, dude, you're killing it with everything else, the only thing I could probably say is this sometimes does not come off across.
So does that kind of sour, or not sour, but I guess inadvertently or just take way more weight into the conversation because of the way that was approached?
Well, and
take away from some of the good things?
Yeah, absolutely, because, it felt like it was an attack right off the bat, right? And instead of being perceptive or open to listening, I felt that now I got to defend myself, right? And that's not the...
Because I have some notes, obviously, because this is a topic where I want to make sure I'm really going to dial
communicating it effectively.
Communicating effectively was really one of the things I want to make sure that business owners understand, or people just understand in general, that when you're communicating with people, most people, because of our experiences, we become defensive right away. Yeah. Right. That's an ego thing where when someone's communicating with us, or we perceive that it's potentially negative or whatever it is, we immediately, our default action is to become defensive, right? And so we then start to listen to respond and defend versus listening to actually receive the feedback and take the feedback out of it, right? And kind of temper our response to it and say, okay, what can I take from this? So, there's two sides to that. So there's on the receiving side of you being that person doing that, but it's also, they'll flip it around where you have to deliver that type of communication to somebody. Okay, what are the learnings from that? What can you do differently? Or can you empathize with that? That's usually the perspective, or that's what that person's feeling. And now, how do you deal with that? How do you know that that's predominantly what's going to happen, and what are the skills to be able to work with that to then shape the conversation or shape the feeling of that conversation differently?
Right.
And that leads us to one of the frameworks that I think is really important, and it's the idea of content and context. And that might sound like a really vague idea. What is it? We'd say, it's content versus context. And I think the easiest way to explain it is, I wish I had something here to help me visualize this. Oh my goodness.
That is not at all strategically placed.
I'm going to hold we're not product.
We're not product advertising.
Exactly. So
if
our fellow people might know what this is.
Yeah.
But
that's just a green bottle.
It's just a green bottle. You see these everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, the idea, if I were to say to you, Saad, if what's the content of this?
Green.
It's a liquid, right?
Yeah,
so that's the content.
Liquid, yeah.
Yes. Right. Looks like a green liquid.
Yeah.
But that's the content.
Yeah.
Right. Now, to help wrap your heads around what the context is, the context is everything that's holding it all in. Okay. So that's basically everything that is the shape of this thing, to shape everything, the materials to hold it all together. That holds the content.
The content is holding the context in it, or sorry, the context is holding the content.
The context holds the content.
Okay.
Right? The contents are always inside.
Okay.
So the context always holds. So if we think about it like that. So I'm going to take this away from you.
Okay.
So in terms of a business, right? If we kind of step back a little bit, and before we kind of take it down into the area of communication, from a business standpoint, the content is really like, it's your product, your services, your people, your procedures, and things like that. It's kind of like what's the inside of your business. The context is really around, it's the rules that bind you together as a team. So just like go back, we'll bring it back out again. Thank you. You can have context that is, it's, when you take this, it's actually pretty thin.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you can have that type of context, so that kind of strength of context, or just so happens. Oh, look at that.
Where did that come from?
So for those who can't see, I now have a mug on the table, and yes, I made this mug.
Yeah.
Very happy for this one. But the biggest difference between the two is this is now solid.
Yeah.
So the context is much more durable. And what this can also do is this withstand a lot more pressure and a lot more heat, which is really important. So when you talk about your business, we talk about context. It's when the pressure comes on, when the heat comes on your business, what is your business made of? What are the rules? What are the things that bind everything together? So sometimes that's core values. Some businesses call it a code of honor, but it's really the rules from a business standpoint that bind you together. So what is the strength of that? What are the things that we believe together that are really going to hold it for when the pressure comes on? So when the economy takes a dump, right? When inflation's running rampant, or there's so many stresses that are coming on the business, how do we respond and know that we have each other, right? Now that becomes really important for things like communication. When we're having to talk with people about, potentially tough conversations.
Yeah.
And how do we, continue to reinforce what that type of context that we want? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, anything you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you to kind of give an example of a tough conversation or a tough conversation situation, aside from what, you
I think you already opened up with a great one. So let's just say we have to give someone feedback. We're going to do let's say performance review.
Right.
That's an easy one. Not an easy conversation to have. I mean, it is if you're maybe don't really care, but that's not who we're talking to.
Yeah.
Right. We're looking for, and what we're hoping to do is work with companies to help them build a stronger context. Yeah. So with that, when you're having to deal and deliver potentially very factual, tough conversation around performance review, well, that's one. People will typically have a lot of negative association attached to. Why is that? Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had some in my lifetime, and typically what they are is, well, here's where you're not measuring up to our standard.
Yeah.
Right. And
most people just don't want to be told what they're doing wrong.
Right.
Because that's an attack on their character. Right.
We immediately feel like that.
Yeah.
Right. And it becomes a defensive mechanism. And so we are now listening to defend versus listening to get feedback and things like that. So there's multiple things around there. Now there is, when delivering these kind of conversations, it's really important, I have found, and having to do a lot of these, is that there's a technique or there's a skill it's called being able to as is the situation. And that's really just calling it as it is. So Saad, here's the deal. We're going to talk about this today. Now, I can only imagine that you may have gone through these before. And you know what? I don't think that they've all been really super positive experiences. In fact, probably some of them, as I'm talking about this right now, you can probably think of like just some really bad experiences. That's fair. That's a normal response. What we're here to do today is to really look at some very just factual stuff. And I want to just reiterate to you that this is not an opportunity for me to beat up on you or for us to beat up on you and point a finger at you. This is really an opportunity to say, okay, for both of us to learn and understand where it is that we can do better to support each other. I don't know if you remember this, but we talked about this, I try to talk about this with everyone, is that, there's two sides to, and we both have responsibilities in our relationship as we work together. Right. So what I need you to do, your responsibility is to bring a desire to want to do better and continue to grow, right? You bring the desire to the table. I bring the training, the skills, the coaching, the feedback, and all the things to enable and support you and the ability to remove roadblocks for you. That's my responsibility. If I don't do that for you, well, then I'm failing you as your leader and things like that. So this might be a little bit different approach, but I'm basically wanting to let you know, I know these aren't typically fun experiences, or what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve is in alignment with what we said that we're trying to accomplish here as our mission. And in doing so, this is how I want this conversation to be. So that's the type of conversation when you talk about context and as ising it, just being able to have a really good conversation, say, I understand, I can empathize with the fact that you've probably gone through this before and it probably did feel friggin' fantastic.
Right.
But this is what we're doing here. Is that a different approach than you've heard people take?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the things that, kind of, if I had the opportunity ever do, and kind of want your, this is just open feedback, like tell me what it is that you think about the situation. So a lot of times you have leaders doing performance reviews.
Yes.
I haven't ever come across a leader asking for a review on how they could improve, because like you basically just said, I want to open up all the roadblocks for you. Like, I want to empower you to do better and do more.
Right.
A lot of times people feel that they cannot talk to their leaders. I know we're speaking to leaders right now.
Yes.
But people that have leaders above them, they feel that there's a bit of a gap in between the communication.
Yeah.
So as a leader, what can be done to also receive feedback? Because that's a tough conversation, because having a subordinate.
This goes back to the context.
Right.
What type of organization are you building? So, and we're talking to you business owners out there, and this is where you need to get crystal fucking clear on what type of business you're trying to operate.
Right.
Are you an organization are you the type of person, people, team, company that takes accountability and responsibility for things? Or do you resort or fall to the three base behaviors that people do, right? Which is you either lay blame. So it's not my fault. It's that person, or it's because of this. I blame everything else. Yeah. It's Jimmy.
Jimmy's not pulling his weight.
Jimmy's not pulling his weight. Oh yeah. Dave messed up and that's why we didn't get the order out, or whatever it is. We point our fingers. We blame everything else in our son except taking responsibility for our actions. The other one is justify. Well, because so-and-so happens, this is how we always do it. Or we just use it as an enabler to continue doing poor behavior. And the other one is we just straight out deny it. Most people just, oh no, that didn't happen. Those are the three default behaviors that you see in those organizations. Right. So if you have leaders that are behaving like that, you have a problem. You have a leadership problem. You have a context problem. So either you're not working and coaching and moving those people through, or you're actively enabling it, or you're part of that problem. So the question you're asking around what happens, that really depends on the type of organization that you have. Because if you are working to build a strong context where I know you have my back because I have your back, because we agreed that, guess what, no matter what, I will never leave a man behind. We agree that what it means that when we say we're show up on time means that for us means 10 minutes early, ready to rock and roll. Those are the types of things that we have agreed up front, like our core values, the things that we hold dearly, that we live and breathe, that are part of our DNA,
Right.
that we agree that this is how we play the game. And we talk about playing above the line. So either you're a team that denies, labels, blames, justifies all those behaviors, or you choose to play above the line and take accountability and responsibility. That is a tough game to play.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to play that game. That's the reason why you have scenarios where you have leaders doing terrible performance reviews that don't look for feedback, or they don't have a strong enough context where people feel truly safe and enabled to give the proper feedback back to say, actually, this is where I have a challenge in here, because they don't know how to communicate. No one's taught them how to communicate. No one's coaching them. And so what they do is what they know. And what they've seen. And I get it. I have been there. I have been that person. I've been that manager, that leader.
Yeah.
Right? Thinking that, oh, because I'm in this role, I have the place of authority, what I say goes. And yes, you do have a certain level of authority. You also have a tremendous amount of responsibility that comes with that to lead people, treat people well, and build them up, not tear them down. And part of that is being able to look and be willing to look at your blind spots.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I know that's a lot. It's because it's such a tricky, it's actually not that tricky. It is a clear indication of what type of organization, what kind of company you are leading, and what type of behavior you allow to permeate and infiltrate your business, and what type of leaders and what type of people you associate.
Right.
That show me what your leadership is and at those levels, and I will tell you exactly what type of business you have. Being able just to look at that, or if you're willing to cut corners and all those things because you're unwilling to have hard conversations. And I will be fair. Sometimes, there's a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, and brings us back to that whole quadrant, right? Like, I get it. Sometimes you're just trying to do the best you can, and I have to sometimes gauge myself a bit to understand that we have all come from different paths and different experiences. And some people do not have the fortunate experiences that I've just been fortunate to have, to be able to shape a way or get to a place where you understand that that's such an important thing, and give them the grace as a human being to say, okay, I get it. You're operating in a place of ignorance. Now let's peel that awareness back and understand what your responsibility is in this. Because if you are truly looking at creating something big and have purpose, then there are levels of maturity, there's levels of growth that you have to get to, and you have to become better. You have to do better. You have to be better in a lot of ways, and being able to communicate with people and lead them truly is one of those ways.
Yep.
If you can't tell, I believe a lot.
About that.
I knew you were going to say that. I believe in this a lot because of how important it is when you look at the behaviors and how, like, what you want to create as a business. That's so important. How you come together, what holds you, and all that. I know a couple episodes ago we talked about special forces and that. One of the things that's really impressed upon them is their code of honor, that their core values are so tight. They know in the most strenuous, stressful, crazy situations on the planet, they have absolute trust in their teammate that they have them.
Yeah. And they also have to remain calm. Like, they can't let the situation get the best of them. And that's when you find, the house breaking from the inside.
Yes.
That's when it starts trickling down from the inside, right?
Yeah.
That's absolutely true, because, this is why we really, really enforce the whole mindset, the fact that, as a leader, you have to grow, you have to work on yourself, because now there's people that are looking to you. They're looking for your
You have a responsibility. You have a responsibility. People have been entrusted in your care. Whether or not you agree with that is irrelevant. That is the truth of it. Yeah. people have been entrusted. They're entrusting their livelihood to you. You have a responsibility to show up as the best you that you can, especially if you have a big purpose, especially if you're out there to do important things, then that responsibility is even greater to move past yourself and then help people move past themselves. So we'll jump back into that conversation where you're providing feedback. Some of the things in there are, again, they're premised on when you're recruiting, you can use core values to really have that conversation around, this is what our expectations are. This is the level of game we play. And if you're not comfortable with that, doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means we're going to have a very frustrating time because I'm going to expect this of you, but I also expect this of me to be able to deliver for you. And if you don't have the desire to do that, that's fine. We're just going to move on. Couple last things. I think we're just, before we make sure we're on time for everything and wrap up, is, you have to understand that, again, people are, when you're in that, they're really listening to defend. So part of the as-ising is then also help them understand what they're going to expect from that conversation. So, there's an example I use when to bring on a new coaching client. Say, look, everything right now in the moment, you're signing on, you're becoming a client, everything's great. You're excited. You're a little nervous, right? Here's what's going to happen is you're going to start second guessing. You're going to say, oh, wow, I just spent a lot of money. I don't know what to expect anymore. And you're going to then go down and you're going to have a very negative experience. You're going to start to question everything. And I'm telling you, this is going to happen. In fact, it's not going to happen right away, but I guarantee you within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to have the conversation where I remind you that we've had this conversation. So this is a normal experience. This is the normal human experience. We're going to go to the valley of despair. And then as we start to work through that, the key is to stay in. And I'm basically telling you what the experience is going to be like. So helping people understand, you're not going to remember everything in this conversation. In fact, you're going to take this piece of paper, you're going to go back and read it, and you're going to interpret something completely different. And that's fine. That's a normal thing. We're going to come back together again in a couple of days. And I'm going to remind you that we've had this conversation here about my responsibility to you, that I'm not pointing my finger at you and ignoring the 3 fingers pointing back at me and my responsibility. This is our opportunity to find out, are there areas I can be doing better to support you in? Yeah. And are there areas that you need help and better and more support in, or could be doing better in? And we're just going to have that and work together for that.
A wise coach once said, when emotions are high, intelligence is down.
Well, yes. Emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. So that's basically a lot of the thing. And then the one thing I will say is, so for those that begin to implement this right away, do not think that just because you suddenly are showing up differently and behaving differently, that suddenly everyone's going to magically respond differently to you.
Yeah.
It takes time, a lot of time to back that up consistently in and day out to change that environment. And because people have great memories, they have a lot of experience, and they will continue to be the story that's attached to until you continue to break it. So be prepared for a very long road ahead of, it's not going to change overnight. That's fine. I'm telling you right now, that's what's going to happen. It will change. It might take a year. It might take 2, it might take 3. Be consistent. Be better. Do better. It will come around. But you have to start now, because if the longer you delay, the longer it's going to take.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the reason why I really love what you were just saying, and I was nodding my head like a bobblehead, because I just went through a similar experience. You see this one behavior this entire time, and then overnight they just change and then they start doing something different. But for me, I've only seen this, and then whatever approach they take, I can still only associate that specific memory to the way they have been. So the change is a ongoing process. It's something that has to be worked on.
It is a long game. You have to play the long game. And I'll say this is more on the personal side. So when the kid's mom and I split and everything. Like they were younger, and I knew, or I became, as that we had time apart, I became aware of a lot of my own behaviors that I needed to address. Now, it became a very clear learning of how, like, what type of long game, just because you start to react differently, you change the way you behave, does not mean that your children who have been with you their whole lives, right, suddenly are just going to
Also change
their reaction. Oh my goodness. Oh, he didn't get all mad this time.
Yeah.
He didn't freak out this time. So that means everything's good. Nope. No. That's years of making. And I know even as a manager, or, say manager, leader, leading a lot of people, having times, I spoke about this before, but I would come back from a meeting, it didn't go well, or something, we have an incident, and I would just allow my emotions to get the better of me. And I would go and I would slam my door, and it would shake most of the building. And inadvertently, I'm just expressing my pissed off nature, right? Because my emotions are high. I'm not thinking about anybody else but myself. Intelligence is in the toilet. Yeah. And all I'm doing is I am creating an environment where people are now afraid.
Yeah.
Because now they don't know which side of me they're getting.
Yeah.
Are they getting the good side of me? Are they getting Jekyll or Hyde?
Yeah.
And how many of us do that without even realizing? And so now when I made the decision to be like, oh, I cannot do that anymore. I have to show up in a way that is so much better than I ever have. Doesn't matter if I've had a shit day. Doesn't matter if I've had a great day. I have to show up at the best all the time for my people, because they need to know that I'm the one that they can depend on, that I'm going to be there in their corner. That's not an easy thing. And by the way, that doesn't change the way they immediately, that they suddenly feel safe, or that they suddenly change the way they react, or that they're magically your star performers. Yeah. That just doesn't happen. It is the same thing that I experienced with my children. It is a long process. It's completely worth it.
Yeah.
Completely worth it. But it takes a lot more than you think it does. Mm-hmm. The payout from that is immense, because you're now developing people. You're helping them become better versions of themselves. They're now learning how to. Yeah.
And you yourself are becoming better.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the ripple effect of all that. So I know we started talking about feedback, communication. Hopefully that gives the business
minimum
owners
effective dosage for today's episode.
Right. And so you can go back and you can listen to the conversation around setting context. Why is context so important? Well, that is the thing that really holds everything together. So your behaviors and how you start to interact with each other becomes the context. Yeah. People knowing that they have the solid you all the time is important, right? And that you start building that with each other. You start to set the expectation. You start to let people know. You start to understand, like, by as ising the situation, you're empathizing with them to show that I get it. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I understand what's probably going through your head right now. And just being able to acknowledge that, for a lot of people, puts them at ease. Like, okay, this is not a one-way conversation. Telling you this is not a one-way conversation. I'm not absolving myself of responsibility. I'm not here to point my finger at you and beat down on you. This is an opportunity for us to figure this out together. Mm-hmm. All those things really work together. But it's, again, this is something you need to start doing, small increments over a long period of time to become better and more consistent.
And please go back and listen to the episode about questions. That goes hand in hand with this as well, to further improve the way you communicate.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's a good place to call it.
Yep.
I know we went past our initial time,
Yeah.
but
We appreciate you guys staying around, listening, and obviously, like, some of these topics, they hit close to home for us, and that's why we also, you'll find that there's a lot of passion in certain things that we talk about, because it has taken a long time to be able to develop these skills and be able to effectively communicate. So we appreciate all the time you guys spend and listen to how we can add value back to your guys' lives. So, thank you, moms.
as always.
Yeah.
And for those of you who have just joined the journey of Biz Meds, thank you for joining. If you've been here, and I know many of you have been here from the very beginning, thank you. The only thing we can ask, we don't do it very often, is if you liked something, share it and help spread the word. We're just getting started.
That's the only way we're able to grow, is by word of mouth. And we'd appreciate if there's anything you find of value, definitely
share it, pass it on. And remember, you're just one day away from the life you've always dreamed about. We will see you in the next episode.